this at the end of it all. In studio with me are two gentlemen whom I'm going to ask to do quick introductions. And as we do continue, we shall as well be joined by our other panelists that will be coming online via Zoom. Let me start with my immediate right. Good morning to you, Sebo. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning.
Make us feel at home.
Good morning, viewers and listeners. My name is Edwin Muhumza. I work as the Director of Corporate Affairs at the PPDA, Uganda.
Wonderful. You're welcome to UBC TV, as well as welcome to Uganda, because Uganda is watching, Africa is watching, the world is watching. Yes. To my extreme right.
Thank you, Ken. My name is Gilbert Sendugwa. I work as the Executive Director of the Africa Freedom of Information Center, which is a Pan-African civil society network that promotes right to information, transparency, and accountability across Africa. I'm very pleased to be here. Good morning, dear listeners.
And as well the viewers in that kind of context. It's a wonderful morning, definitely, and it's as well a wonderful kind of interface having these two gentlemen in studio. And just like I did promise us, we shall be having others join us, not necessarily gentlemen, but other panelists joining us. As you can see, there is one of them on Zoom. You could wave to us and a little come into the picture. And just, perfect. As of course we do continue. So let's actually get it out of the way. This whole aspect of the research that was conducted. I will start with Mr. Sendugwa. You being in that kind of capacity that you hold, we might need an abstract. What exactly was this whole call for, and what was it directed towards?
Yes, thank you very much for that important question. Digital technology systems, and in particular biometric systems, facial recognition systems, and artificial intelligence systems play an important role in enabling public agencies, ministries and departments and agencies to perform their functions, their mandates, whether it is election management, whether it is border control, or security. You know, technology is very, very important in enhancing their capabilities and abilities to perform these functions so that, you know, citizens are secure, so that citizen voices in the case of elections are heard, that only those that are eligible to vote, for example, vote, and the outcome represents the true will of the people, among other issues. Now, this said, the procurement of these systems, according to the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, has stated in their research that this sector, procurement in this sector of communication and information technology systems, is among the top 4 that is affected by corruption. And when there is corruption, then the ability of these agencies to execute their mandate is undermined. Also, the ability for the technologies that have been procured to enable these agencies to do their work is also affected. Now, on the other hand, there are also concerns regarding safeguards of data that is collected using these systems. I've already said that, you know, these systems are important in enabling these agencies perform their functions, but quite often this information ends up in the hands of third parties, and the regulation of that, the transparency of that aspect is challenged. How do they access, who accesses, under what conditions is of paramount importance. Viewers and listeners might know or may have received, for example, information that, especially through online, that we have your nudes, you have to pay us this amount of money, and if you don't, you know, we are going to publish them. Also, some may have received promotional information that this company is selling this item.
Yeah.
And sometimes you find that actually you're interested in that item, but you don't know how they have come to know that about your contact and your potential interest in that item.
Yes.
All these are concerns that data collected using these systems should be safeguarded and only used in a transparency way and with the consent of data subjects. We have also seen in other circumstances this data being used for political reasons. Someone is contesting for elections and they have access to your data, you don't know how, and you see some messages coming your way and promoting this political group or party or candidate. So the idea is that this data should be safeguarded. Now, in some of these maybe are not extreme, but in extreme circumstances, crooks could access this information and use it to target and harm data subjects, and all this should be avoided. So it is with these concerns that we conducted this study in 3 countries, that is Liberia, Nigeria, and Uganda. And the idea was, to assess, the transparency of the procurement of these systems, who are the buyers, who are the sellers, at what cost, what systems and procedures do they follow, and at what price, and all this, and how much information actually is disclosed about these procurements. But also, we wanted to examine the regulation and safeguards regarding the management and use of data that is collected using these systems.
Now, that is quite an interesting abstract. It actually takes me to Edwin, PPDA. That is Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority, right? When Gilbert explains what he has, it brings us to a point of understanding, yes, perhaps there is a bit of uncertainties, maybe there is a bit of inflation when such systems are bought or procured, or perhaps as well, there is an element of misuse of such in the process of the procurement, the follow-up of the processes, the pursuits and everything. As PPDA, is there a justification that indeed maybe the thoughts of the wananchi, the people that is the local man, the local woman out that side have, is a right kind of thought? Are they right to think that way?
Well, there's not necessarily, because we have to understand, as he explained, what the digital technology systems are. These are the systems that usually the public or the government uses to provide a certain public good.
Let's actually just put them down. National ID, driving permit, passport. There are so many,
the recent
basically.
Tracking.
Mobile money.
Yes. So as Gilbert, for example, noted, these are sensitive systems because you have a huge data trove, but you also have an intrusive nature, potential intrusive nature of these systems in people's personal lives. So you have to be very careful on who you even acquire to have this kind of power, because they could misuse
it or even abuse it.
And you've seen this discussion going on all over the world, including the acquisition, for example, of 5G network in the United States and United Kingdom, on whether they should give that contract to certain companies that come from certain countries, because there's a certain element of security. So there's a security element to them.
Mistrust.
So that's where we have to first start from.
Okay.
Now the agencies that the government puts in place,
deploys,
the agencies that are in place to carry out this public mandate, the way the procurement system is designed is that these agencies have to determine, in their best judgment, the best methodology to acquire these types of systems, or for that matter, any procurement. So an agency will sit down and feel, if I'm going to procure something as basic as a laptop, that one, so many providers can avail it, but also what's maybe the risk about opening it up to anybody, and that one you can go open bidding.
Yes.
But if you're going to to procure some of these systems, do you want to remember that once you open it up, you also have to avail the technical specifications. You have to avail,
it's a long process.
No, but the availability of this public information,
whole process, yes.
The availability of this information in public domain can open you up to certain things that Gilbert was saying are risks. If I put my specifications out there in the public and everybody knows what this system is capable of doing, then the bad people can infiltrate you very easily. Yes. So that's, you must understand from the first point why there's that sensitivity in the acquisition of some of these systems across the board, and not just Uganda, worldwide. So there's, and the other element is that they're usually cross-agency. You find there's, if it's Electoral Commission will be there, but there will be NERA involved in this. There will be some, maybe ISO, certain security agency.
UCC. Yeah.
So in that case, the failure to have a public open tender may not necessarily always mean that it's because of corruption. So that's why I was saying the public should not necessarily quickly jump to that conclusion. They must understand the reasoning behind why some of these do not necessarily open up. If you're going to buy, for example, a CCTV camera network for the whole country, is that something you want to just issue a tender out and open those specifications to anybody? Because then they will know how to infiltrate it. So that's the sensitivity. Now the PPDA law allows for different approaches to acquisition, as I stated. There are those of a security nature where even classified procurement is acceptable. So if the agency deems that this may be of a security threat, if we open it up, then they will procure it under the classified methodologies. Now, there are ways that accountability and checks to ensure that that is also not abused. And we agree normally that list of what is going to be classified and what won't be classified with PPDA. We will assign a few people who will be vetted to be able to check and audit these. Auditor General will audit them. So it's not that once they go classified, they do what they want. No, there are measures that are in place, which may not be the traditional measures, but there are checks within the law, but also within the broader public accountability mechanisms to ensure that the public interests actually are kept.
Okay.
So
yes, you wanted to come in,
just
please.
To state also that because of this desire to serve a public good for protection, and therefore procuring in like
in concealment,
in
secrecy,
it appears the public has also been exposed, you know, to financial exposure and risk. For example, in our study, we find that in Uganda, years back, government procured a system for national ID registration and production at 240 billion, which translates to, at current rates, to $67 million. And for that, after 10 years, you know, this firm, which had actually been procured through that kind of arrangement, had only managed to print and issue 401 cards after 10 years, after receiving $67 million.
Yes.
Now, comparatively in Nigeria, we find that Nigerian government had paid $31.8 million in 2015, you know, to procure a system that was going to process and issue national IDs, and they were able to register 73.5 million voters and issue them with cards. Now you can see here that Uganda,
where even the population
paid
is much
double
smaller,
the price,
we paid double the price,
and was not able to get 500 IDs after such a long time. And Nigeria pays half of the price and gets, you know, 73.5 million cards. So the need to kind of
come out,
you know, ensure that both public interests, the public interest for safety, in a way, by way of procuring.
Maybe Uganda's cards are having features that make them much more expensive than the Nigerian version.
No, we can't tell because the contract was not disclosed. So if it was not disclosed, then one would say that yes, this is just fine or not. But looking at just 400 cards for $67 million, anyone can tell that
there was an inflation.
Now, going back, how was this farm procured? You know, yes, we can agree that there is need for safety, there is need to protect this, but I think even then, you know, there are ways to go and get what one would call genuine, legitimate, and authentic companies. Now, we also find in our study instances of where the same bidders win all the time with the same agencies. If they are good, why don't they win in various agencies? The moment that it is the same agencies all the time, then, but they cannot win with their goodness in another agency, then there will be some questions.
So where does that point, because I'm sure in that research, there must have been a conclusion of sorts. But before I return to Edwin, where does that point the error? Where does it come from? Where does it originate from? Because I want to believe, for example, at the corporation here, we cannot have the same mistake happening today, tomorrow, and the other day, and we fail to point out why that mistake is happening the same way every other time. So where did the research point the error emerging from?
I think what we see, for example...
Who awards those contracts in simple terms?
For example, if you look at the Uganda Electoral Commission, you find that, you know, same firms have been winning tenders for DTS, you know, all the time, or most of the time. And these are tenders that involve billions, over 200 billion in each of the cases of money. Now, what one would be interested in is, you know, what is the process inside? How come that is this particular firm which always wins? And therefore, look at, you know, these others, why do they fail? What price do they offer? And then that would give comfort. So the level of disclosure is very, very important. Maybe not much would be disclosed, but I think after the fact, there should be some report issued. Okay. For example, in this case of the 400 cards, I think it is a legitimate concern that the public gets to know really what went wrong, what are the issues, how can they be avoided, so that even those agencies that are involved, you know, can learn from them and do better next time.
Going forward. Edwin, as PPDA, we definitely know in this capacity that you are before the screen today and on the tele, you represent PPDA. Results of such a finding come our way, or rather come your way, and as PPDA, I'm wondering, how do you come in as an authority?
Okay, before I go in, I need to clarify something for the record so that it doesn't go. Gilbert is talking about certain acquisition that $60 million and then we had 400 cards. It's not quite that way.
Wonderful. This is the reason you're here.
This was, and I don't speak for
the PPDA.
And I speak for the PPDA, but I wouldn't speak for the agencies responsible, like the Electoral Commission. But what I know, some of that the venture is talking about was supposed to be an integrated system that had an element of the national ID, the Electoral Commission, and so many things. And it was a PPP. So the value of the whole thing was supposed to be $68 or so million, but largely funded by the private sector. So the government did not pay from the public coffers for a service of at $68 million, and we only got 400 cards. I think when they came and as private sector and started doing this, they figured maybe the business was not right because they were supposed to recover their money in a certain way.
I am begging that since you're giving a clarity, we do so much of we do away with a lot of I think I assume.
No. I'm actually stating a matter of fact here. The thinking was I can't explain, for example, why they chose not to continue with the business. That's why I think
why they pulled out.
So they pulled out, and the only thing I can speculate on is the reason being maybe a business decision. But the point of clarity really was that the government did not pay $68 million and then got 400 cards.
So do you feel government did a good service to its people, keeping quiet and not explaining that?
No, I think that was explained because that came out in the public. So it's just a clarification because figures can, but that's not to lose the point of the general point of what I was saying. I was just trying to clarify something, and I don't speak for Electoral Commission.
Yeah, of course. But as PPDA,
now, on the second part of your question on what do we get from these reports, we work closely with these civil society organizations and FIC and its partner organizations, and we take the reports they produce seriously because they come up with recommendations, and let nobody take it that I am here to rebut anything that they've raised. We actually agree with a lot of the findings that are in. We just need to balance the different interests, and I think Gilbert rightly stated so. You have a public interest for access to information. You have a public interest to be secured. You have a public interest for personal data to be protected. The same thing, let me say currency production. I don't think it would be good for Bank of Uganda to advertise in the newspaper and say, oh, we need a company to produce money, to print money.
A NASA road company.
Because the moment they do that, one of the things they would have to do is provide the specifications for the money. The moment you put those specifications out, then anybody will be able to print that money. That's why some of these are classified.
Yes.
Now, classified doesn't mean that sometimes there's no competition. And the industry is small for some of these systems. That's why Gilbert is also told, why is it's the same companies? Yeah, so when you go to some of these industries like printing money, national IDs, biometric systems, there are not many providers because largely these are government systems, and so if something is only limited to the governments and a few governments, you won't have many players in these arenas. But we take the point that even where there's some element of classified procurement done, you owe it to the public to give, to the extent possible, information for their own comfort. Indeed, if I am going to have my car tracked, I would want to know how did you get this company, who are they from, so that I am comfortable that, and you can see the responsible officers have been laboring to explain that this is not going to be necessarily an intrusive element. So the point from this report, there are recommendations, there are things that we have to balance, of course, but there are things that we have not been doing right as government and these agencies, and we will engage them on how to, because at the bottom of this is public confidence in what you're doing, because once that information is not there, that's why people will speculate, information will be distorted, and some of these things now it's very difficult to start explaining them later, yet you could have saved yourself a lot by being a little transparent at the beginning.
By doing away with the confidential, secret.
No, you can't. It's important because there's confidentiality is very important to a certain extent, but it has to be balanced with some form of accountability. There's sometimes a conflict, but you have to get the right balance.
And that is very important because, for example, in the context of the ongoing debate regarding the car tracking system, you know, the AG was on the media last night, and his explanation, Attorney General, Attorney General, and he was saying that, look, the government is not going to pay money to this firm, but, you know, the public is going to be paying this money. So if the public is going to pay this money, I think it is also reasonable that it is the right amount and it is fair.
The best negotiation,
and
actually.
they have confidence that they are going to get value. So even when the government is not going to pay directly, as was the case with the other national ID project, a lot of care is needed, to fairly represent citizens.
Courtesy. Yeah.
Beyond courtesy, so that the government, has a duty to fairly represent its citizens in negotiating these contracts, so that a fair amount is paid.
Okay.
In this ongoing debate, I was surprised, for example, that they don't know.
Who?
Under the
Who doesn't know?
The Attorney General doesn't know how much price a car owner is going to be paying. And yet, he has committed the citizens and the country
to that payment,
to an unknown price. You see the risk. And then how this farm is procured and all this, and then questions now of the capacity, integrity of this farm are coming up. I think there is a major issue of concern.
Okay, let's try to get a hold of the discussion in studio as of now, but in that way, connecting with Liberia. We do have Mr. Lami. I hope that's the right pronunciation, Brother Lami Parogi. He's in Liberia. He's been following the discussion. And I was trying to take a look at the findings of the study that was conducted. I do realize there's something in common between Liberia and Uganda. The people in Liberia, just like the study does indicate in Uganda, do not have the confidence of safety of their information being in the hands of those that run public service in as far as the data that is collected from the people. And I do recall there was also a case sometime where George Weah, is it a former president now, was, he was implicated in a money scam of a sort. And I'm wondering why this came up. But you being in Liberia, Brother Lami, you could give us a bit of a highlight and as well shed some light on the aspect of Liberians as well as Ugandans, as per the report, having no confidence in their kind of safety when it comes to such systems.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me on your show this morning. The report, our study basically found that people were not aware of the procurement process generally, and specifically even procurement process around these digital technology systems. So that lack of confidence basically epitomizes the fact that government, shields itself most times from public scrutiny when it comes to the issue of spending money. So a lot of people that we interview had no ideas of how the acquisition of these technologies work. They had absolutely no idea of how the procurement works. And in a case in point, a few years ago, the Liberian National Police, the police force in the country, decided to set up surveillance systems. There's absolutely no record of how they procure that system. There's no record of what was told to the public about whether those systems were present and where they were deployed. They were obviously meant to improve public safety, but there was absolutely no information around that. And there's really a need for the populations in these countries to actually understand how their monies are being spent. I agree with the security challenges around putting out information that may lead to potential bad guys knowing how to game the system. But notwithstanding, if it is the public's money, there is a need for the public to actually know how their money is being spent and what is being spent on. On the issue of data acquisition, in my country right now, there is absolutely no law that protects the people from intrusive data collection and even use. The Freedom of Information law we have limits. Am I getting through? The freedom of information law we have limits the release of personal information, but I mean that is really unlimited form of protection. So there's really a need for more law reform. There's a need for putting in place more safeguards to ensure that the authorities do not abuse, or even private people also who have access to data collected by digital technology systems, to make sure that they do not abuse the data that is collected, and they do not carry out intrusive surveillance without the people of the country understanding what is happening, especially around personal information that they collect.
Wow, this is quite interesting. So, Lami, if we may ask you, how free is access to information concerning Liberians in your country, Liberia? Is it so free, as in, is it freely accessible?
So it depends on what you want the information about. So there are laws that allow people the access to information. We have a freedom of information law going back to 2010 September. The implementation of that law has been really sketchy at times. And I mean, I'm a lawyer here. I work around access to information issues. Sometimes we have to take the government to court to get information released. When it comes to the extractive industry, information is readily available because we are part of the EITR process, the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. So they have a proactive disclosure regime around that has worked well for several years now, going back to 2009. But when it comes to generally other issues, the process is extremely opaque. The public procurement and concession process in this country also has a level of transparency around the release of information, because government agencies are required to submit their procurement plans at the beginning of every fiscal year. They generally do that, but those fiscal plans most times are not really detailed. They don't really specify some of the most sensitive things that they intended to buy. They will basically just be talking about recurring things like fuel and stuff like that. So the process of information dissemination is kind of patchy, depending on which institution, which sector of the economy you're talking about. When it comes to government information, most times it's not really open, although we have the budget that is published annually on the Ministry of Finance website, but the budget is basically just numbers. Going behind those numbers to see how they are spent is a totally different ballgame.
Okay, and probably my other question to you before we can link back into studio briefly is concerning the aspect of the picture it is in Uganda where we are right now. Most of the fraternities work together. For example, we've talked about NIRA, which is a national agency and authority concerning our information. We've talked about to some extent UCC. We've talked about the Electoral Commission, which is a database for the information about the people that take part in an election and the likes. I'm wondering, is it the same in Liberia? Do you have sister bodies? Do they work together, or they are perhaps independent?
Okay, they are all right now. They are all independent. In 2011, the government created the National Identity Registry, and the act that created the National Identity Registry basically made the National Identity Registry like the umbrella group to coordinate data gathering across the government. And they are supposed to be setting standards and putting in place regulations for personal data, the collection and use of personal data across the government. When I spoke to the head of that agency a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago when we were working on this program, he told me that they have done nothing of such. They have not put in place any regulation on how data should be collected and used across the country, across the government. They've not put in place any such measure, and they've been in existence for about 10 years now, and they've not made any move on doing that. So right now it's a very scattered arrangement. The National Elections Commission has its own data collection mechanisms. The Bureau Liberia Immigration Service has its own. The same thing for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Liberia National Police. So they all just scattered all over the place, as opposed to them being coordinated by the National Identification Registry as the law requires.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lami. Parogi, that is if that is the right pronunciation anyway. You will not have to fault me.
Pagoy. It's Pagoy.
I know you're a lawyer. Please don't sue me. Please don't sue me.
No, I won't.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Please keep on Zoom as we try to bring the conversation back to studio a little briefly.
Yeah.
For you that is watching us on UBC TV, we are reflecting on a research that was conducted by the Africa Freedom of Information Center, AFIC. And this was in relation to government's procurements and acquisitions of digital technology systems. We've made a mention of a bit of those, the likes of driving permit systems, national IDs, and so much of that has your data going into their kind of database for whatever pursuit it is that they do work out to serve you better. Now, in studio with me are two gentlemen, as you might have witnessed a little while earlier, and just as we do have our brother in Liberia, Mr. Lami, I'm not mentioning the other name just to avoid summons. In studio with me are two gentlemen, and I'm now going to shift to Edwin, who is actually from the PPDA, the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority. On Monday, while it's doing one of my shows on radio, we did have a discussion on bureaucracy, the aspect of going through processes for the clarity of that whole process to come out the right way. As PPDA and the way these whole entities come into the picture, do you feel that whole process of process by process, as the talk of town has been in the recent days, is a good call, or perhaps it falls on effectiveness and on-time delivery of services such as the ones we are talking about?
No, first of all, process per se is not a problem, because process gives legitimacy.
Even when there is urgency?
When there's urgency, there's also process for an urgency.
Okay.
So it's not that there's a standard, and I hear this, that for every procurement you have to start from plan, go advertise. No. There are many procurements that don't have to go through that process. As I stated earlier, when we were opening up, I said the methodology to use for a particular acquisition process is determined by the agency in their best judgment. And the law is there as a standard, but the law also gives so many windows to different scenarios. For example, there are emergency. A few weeks ago, I came here to speak about emergency procurements. If UBC needed something tomorrow, you're not going to have to advertise and go through these processes. So if you're going to go to acquire, for example, a service or a supply that has hundreds of providers, as a government, you need to give opportunity to all these providers. So in that case, you advertise, just like recruitment for human resource. So the process you use is based or determined by the outcome you want. So the other thing you must also notice from the private sector's point of view, if you want to build a road, construct a road, and you advertise, the timelines you give them is to also allow them to be able to assess that area they are going to construct that road, because you can't pick somebody tomorrow and then say start. They have to first do a certain assessment of their own. They have to put together resources. They have to put together even certain legal documentation, and that doesn't take just 2 weeks. The length of the process from initiation to acquisition, I mean to contract signature, with the longest process from our calculations, indicative, should be at least 110 working days.
That is approximately 4 months.
That's the longest, an international bidding process. But it tends to take a little longer because of other administrative...
When it is an aspect and an issue of emergency, let's say, for example, the passports that are going to be switching to an East African passport. I'm assuming the deadline is coming very close, and we need to just switch. How long would that kind of process, be shortened to, let's say, a period of 1 month? Is it possible? Or still, even in the short run, an urgent kind of procurement also has a timeline, maybe a length of, let's say, instead of 100 days, working days, it has, let's say, 20 to 30 working days. Is that as well available? When
it's an emergency, I mean, you just have to be even creative. You may need it that day. Okay. However, the definition of emergency in the law is such that it has to be urgent. It must not be caused by dilatory conduct. Dilatory conduct is when you knew something was going to happen, but you kind of play around until it's too late. We didn't, maybe you used the wrong example. The changeover of passports should not become an emergency. We knew this so many years ago. Because even when those when the protocols are signed, they give countries a very good time. They don't come today and say next week. So the fact that somebody is making an emergency out of it is actually the problem. That you knew this 2 years ago. Why didn't you put in?
So Edwin, just to cut you short on that, but bring you back to full gear. When we look at two particular national securities, well, I don't know why, but I also call it a national security, the driving permit, which is now a license, vis-a-vis the national ID. You realize that the national ID, for so many that are watching us right now, is a problem, even for the one that has lost it. Having a new one printed out for you is still a problem, as though when you lose it, the information as well is lost from the database. Do you feel there is lack of harmony in as far as how the national securities are, printed or executed?
Well, I'm not sure.
Licenses are so fast. I mean, I could go and process one today, and maybe by Friday, I'll be good to go. National ID.
Look, I'm not sure.
2030.
I'm very qualified to respond for the agencies responsible in this particular case, NERA and the rest. But yes, if there are certain inefficiencies in that, and these are not necessarily procurement issues, now it's implementation. And of course, I would urge you to invite NERA here to speak for themselves. But also, what I know as policy is that having these different systems is something that the government is working on through NITA and the Ministry of ICT to have an integrated capability. Because in many countries you go to, you don't have to have an ID, a driving permit. There's one database that allows you access to so many.
Incorporates all the others.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So that is something that I know that NITA, you and the Ministry of ICT are working on, so that you have maybe one identification that has all this data on you. So you just have to present one card and all this data will come in place. There are many systems, of course, in government that are going on, automation of land titles and wherever. But the issue is how they are going to integrate them. On the inefficiencies of an implementation or recovery of like a national ID, I think NERA would be in a better position
to respond.
Come and respond for themselves.
All right, Gilbert, before we bring back Lami onto the screen, I've done a bit of a look at the research findings. It's unfortunate we cannot place them on screen, but we have them with us. And one of the interesting entities is the 1% information disclosed concerning contracts that come the way of signing such, contracts of the sort. I'm wondering, in the same regard, there's a time that the government of Uganda came up with a proposal to print its own securities, money, the permits, the likes of licenses, etc. Now, in the regard of the research findings, that shows us that only 1% of the info concerning the monies involved in the signing of such contracts is available to us, the general public. Do you think the general public would welcome a government printing its own securities from the range of money and other documents that we use in that regard?
Okay, maybe let me also first comment on the area issues we talked about. We see that, for example, even when competition is attempted or used, sometimes there is more that needs to be disclosed and is not. For example, in this fiber optic project, government made a decision to go open bidding, and several companies came up and presented. And I think who presented a proposal for over almost $16 million. Then there was ZTE, 8.6 million, and then CAMSAT, 8.2 million. But again, the one which quoted the highest was selected. These which were quoting half, CAMSAT and ZTE, were not. So again, this is, government has said, let us take this route. And they select the highest, one who has quoted the highest amount. And then they don't disclose, why they feel compelled, to take this one and not the ones who have quoted lowest. So again, emphasizing the need and importance for disclosing a bit more information.
Yes.
Both whether it is a direct or a competitive bidding.
Okay.
Now, regarding the levels of disclosure, we found that disclosure was very low. Disclosure of these contracts across the three.
What causes this? Leave alone what you just explained, the aspect of we are not comfortable, people will accept this. What else causes this? Could it be there are some data deals underlying such? That probably if we disclosed, then people will know how much Kent or maybe Gilbert and Edwin are making off with?
We don't know because, across the three countries, across all the agencies which we studied, we found that disclosure was weak. Less than 1% of these contracts were disclosed. And in all the
it's
countries...
equivalent to zero, by the way.
And all the three countries have respective access to information laws. And in Uganda, we made, under this study, 21 information requests to various agencies, Ministry of Internal Affairs, Ministry of Defense, Civil Aviation Authority, and others. And only one agency responded and provided information. That was the Ministry of Internal Affairs. The rest did not. Now, why are they not doing that? I think they are just not respecting the law. The Access to Information Act specifically says that in denying access, the officer should specify a specific clause under the Access to Information Act they are relying on to deny access. So I think the simple reason is that they are not complying with the law. Now, the law protects deliberative processes.
Just a moment. I want to believe that one of the recommendations from your findings is directed in that line.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on.
Yes. So I was saying that the law protects deliberative processes, but once a decision has been made, and for most of these things, we are not talking about someone requesting to have names, identities of people. We are requesting for documents to know how the process was done to arrive at this decision. The law allows that to happen. In other circumstances, where that information is protected, we are careful not to make those requests.
Okay.
So what needs to be appreciated by government is that disclosure is very important for government because it helps to build trust and confidence of citizens, which makes implementation of policies a bit more easier. Also, it helps government, save money. The example we gave between Uganda and Nigeria and the amount of cards produced, you can see. And then also, we believe also that technologies change. Yeah. All these firms are doing research and innovating all the time. And, the one which was better in 2011 maybe is not the best in 2016. So it is important that agencies like Electoral Commission, break
down those sophistications.
Try out and open up and, try out the market in order to take advantage of those opportunities, which will be very important for government.
Okay.
So there's a lot of value in public agencies, value for government, value for citizens, and value for businesses, for companies, in government disclosing this information.
Okay. Someone sent me a text a little while earlier wondering, Kent, you say you've looked at the findings, but you're asking Mr. Gilbert about the recommendations. Well, my concentration is so much in the findings, and it's because that's the basis of our talk, because the recommendations are for another hand and probably as well a different authority. Hoping that...
But on that point,
yes.
What we recommend is that there should be increased compliance with existing legislation, legislations in as far as disclosure is concerned. And in this case, we are talking about the Access to Information Act, the PPD Act, all these layouts, the various, and then also the Data Protection Act in the case of regulation and safeguarding of access by third parties.
Okay.
We also, and in Uganda, PPD has done very well to create a platform.
I'm surprised Edwin is not doing a bit of bragging. That is a good one for you.
By creating the government procurement portal where these agencies are supposed to disclose this information. Some are disclosing, but many are not disclosing. Some are disclosing part. And I should say also that this 1% disclosure actually is not unique, seems not to be unique to these DTSs, but across the various
in fact, I as well wanted to know, when you talk of 1%, was it uniform for Uganda, Nigeria, and Liberia?
Yes, across the three countries, it was less than % of what was disclosed vis-a-vis what was expected.
Well, but I think we need some context here. I don't know, Gil, when he says 1%, it doesn't mean
less than 1%.
Less than 1% of all public procurement in this country is disclosed. I think there was a sample. There was so it's a but when you know you can extrapolate it, but we have to have some context here.
Yes.
So and he mentioned maybe the government procurement portal. They have monthly reports they give in a manual form. Of course, the bigger challenge of information in this country is also the form in which it is kept. The more we start going electronic, and now we are in the phases of starting electronic government procurement, it becomes impossible for anybody to hide that information, because the law, even the PPD law beyond the other laws, has certain information that is supposed to be public. For example, best evaluator bidder notices, the procurement plans, contract values, that is going to be automatically available for every procurement that is carried out under the e-government procurement system. It's hard now to enforce that completely, because once the manual system, it means you're going to somebody's office and it's now their judgment, sometimes their mood on how you come to give you that information. So the more urgency for us to become, he talked about the government procurement portal, but now once we go electronic government procurement, then all this information becomes completely available. But before I leave, I needed to clarify something that he said, because since we're on public for information. The example he gave of the best evaluated bidder being the highest, with the highest cost. It's not always that the lowest bidder is supposed to take the contract. You have to be the lowest technically compliant. So, and if it's an open tender like the one he was mentioning, there's a best evaluated bidder notice that is put up in public, which shows reasons why the rest failed. So I just thought I needed to give that clarification, so that the public doesn't go out thinking that every time you're the lowest bidder, then you're going to automatically get the tender.
I, for one, have been involved in bidding processes.
You have to look at both technical and financial. But in this particular case, the Auditor General issued a report and communication to the President, where he said that for the 2 phases of this project, government had lost $41.9 million. So yes, it is true that, you know, in making a decision on procurement, you have to look at both technical and financial. But it appears you know, based on what the Auditor General found out, and then the fact that, you know, those who bidded lowest in terms of financial did not get it, and no public information was given, there are questions that maybe or more information could have been provided.
All right. Let's now shift back to Liberia. These are the advantages of technologies. And had we not been facilitated with such technologies at UBC, maybe perhaps we would still be crawling to Liberia. But whoop, boom, see, we are in Liberia already. Well, Lami, welcome back. And of course, just like Gilbert put it, there is something that came into my mind before I actually put to you the question that is designed for you this morning in this regard. Do you as Liberians as well have contracts going to particular companies but with a lot of question marks? And then in the same regard, the information we've been talking about, yes, too many times it's been abused or misused. And from the report that the Africa Freedom of Information Center availed to us, it is very clear that information has so much, or rather so many times, been abused. The question I would put to you, in addition to what I asked earlier on, is can this cause a public uproar? Maybe you could start with the contracts element and then the possibility of public uproar by misuse and abuse of information. Lami.
Yeah, so basically what that does is that it undermines the trust of the public in the governance system. And as a result of that, there's a lot of cynicism that accompanies the governance process. So every time there's no transparency around contracting, especially when it comes to the procurement of systems like digital technology systems that could be used to impact the human rights of citizens, it leads to suspicion. And then suspicion undermines the governance process. So we see that a lot here also, because when it comes to the procurement process, the law requires it to be transparent and open, but most times it isn't. So you most times not know the different bids that went into the process, although different institutions that bid for the contract have the right to put in challenges, but most times the background process when it comes to the bidding process is not made public.
Okay, that is quite interesting. Saliva chips into my trachea. Sorry about that, dear viewer. Lami, there's still something that I'm going to put to you. There is a query that has come my way from Walakira Hussein. He is following the show from this side in Kampala. He says that, is it true that side as well, that government buys the machines, yes, but does not emphasize training of users as some of the cases we've witnessed in Uganda?
So with respect to the training the users who are government officials, is that what the questioner is trying to get at? Training the users who are government officials, or basically training people who are in the public? Yes. I mean, my assumption would be if they acquire a piece of technology, most times they will try to find someone locally who, especially working for the different institutions that can use that technology. Otherwise, sometimes what they do is they employ consultants that will come in and help them to build local capabilities. That has been my experience with some of these different technologies that they acquire.
Thank you so much. We shall be getting back to him in a little while. That is Lami, downside of Liberia. Should we say upside or downside? I think it's upside because Uganda is a little low, on the low side, and I think Liberia is on the high. So I think it's upside of Liberia. Gentlemen in studio, Edwin from the PPDA, and then Gilbert, who is from Africa Freedom of Information Center, AFIC. That is the right pronunciation of the initials, right? The study, as you did give us an abstract, indicates that there was a need to know some of those entities. And much as the study came through, there are some results that you've actually presented, like limited competition, aspects of inefficiency, limited disclosure of info, and the likes. If we were to look into the digital technology systems, for example, in Uganda, because this is our country and perhaps we need to know much more about it, which ones would you place on a high as best performing? And well, let's not look at the poor performers. Let's look at the best performing. Let's say the top 2, top 3.
Yeah, I think we actually, this study was not intended to compare the best and the worst. But for example, if you use one indicator of agencies' responsiveness to information requests, then you find that only the Ministry of Internal Affairs, out of the 21 agencies, provided the requested information. The rest did not. The law compels them to respond. Even when they want to refuse, the law compels them to respond and provide the reason. And then also, here we are talking about the right of citizens to access this information. And then the Act also creates objectives, I think 4 objectives, one of which is to hold public agencies and officials accountable. So the fact that, they are not doing it is an area of concern. And there were safeguards in the Act under Section 43 of the Access to Information Act, which requires each minister to make annual reports to Parliament, and where an information request, not information requests, has been denied, to explain why. But because, ministers have been have been disobeying, complying with this section with impunity for since the law was passed in 2005, and because Parliament has not required them, to comply, you see this kind of behavior that citizens ask for information and they don't respond. And here we are talking about information about public funds, huge public funds, which otherwise would help to improve the education system, the healthcare system. So would urge, ministers to comply, would urge Parliament to require ministers to comply. Now, we see also the same in Liberia, where the Information Commissioner is required to annually make reports to Parliament on the implementation of this law and cite specific instances where agencies are not complying. Again, like in Uganda, the Information Commissioner, since 2010 when the law was passed, and the commissioner was appointed, I think, around 2013-14, he has not published, he has not given to Parliament even one report. So these systems make the law not work. These practices rather make the law not work. It undermines, the spirit of observance of the law and human rights.
When you talked about the 2 examples of the procurement of national documentation being cheaply priced in Nigeria, highly priced in Uganda, and good value for Nigeria, not the best of value for Uganda, it tells me in that scoop, Nigeria performed well. And in fact, what other sections of your study do we see countries, the 3 countries, coming out on top of the other?
Yes.
Or perhaps it was...
The example that you have given is actually very important because in the 2 procurements, Nigeria went a competitive method, whereby they invited companies to express themselves bid, and they selected that and they got that.
Yes.
And in the case of Uganda, for that specific one, the process was direct procurement. Again, pointing to the fact that, even with security considerations, if things are properly done, taking into care the security concerns, there is value in opening these processes so that the best can take it.
But in a nutshell, the 3 countries, I know that was not the intent of the study, but the 3 countries in a nutshell, when you look at governments, their governments' procurements of digital technology systems, which of the 3 would you say is surely performing well? And if they keep to their glue, they will actually achieve far better in the next 20 years?
Okay, in terms of disclosing procurement information, and in this case, the digital technology systems, while disclosure was generally low across the board, we saw that Uganda performed far better than any of the
I was getting scared. I thought countries. It was far worse.
No. And then also, when we asked, because this also had a section of survey where we interviewed ordinary people about the awareness of the procurement of these systems, we found that by far, Nigerian respondents were aware of how these systems were being procured. And this was at 80%, while 70% of the respondents in Uganda did not know. And I believe about 83 respondents in Liberia did not know how this was, DTSs were procured and deployed. So you can't say that, you know, overall this country does better and the other one no, but I think on specific aspects, you know, countries perform
came out on top and relatively low. Let me put this question to Edwin. There's a group of people, there's maybe a singular person watching in their home, someone is watching from their office, and maybe this has never come their way, but you as an authority, public assets, and what is a public asset?
And maybe, sorry, before he comes in, I wanted maybe to mention briefly something important, very briefly.
Yes.
In Liberia, they provided all the information that was requested, and in fact, these requests were verbal. We want this document that they give. We want this and they give.
Not put
now, in Uganda, you know, we made verbal requests, they were not successful. We made written requests, they were not as successful. In Nigeria, I think there were only about 3 responses that we got through information requests.
In Nigeria, you only have to speak pidgin and the information will be given unto you. But anyway, on a serious note, what is a private asset, Edwin?
Public asset.
Yes.
It's a
public asset, sorry.
Our teacher told us not to define a word by using the same word, but let me use the word asset again in the definition.
Yes.
But these are assets, so whatever resources of government that are acquired through what you'd call public resources. And the public resources are money from the consolidated fund, even donor-funded money, or even funds that are collected by what you'd call public, even private resources, private institutions, but for a public good. So yeah, that's what a public asset would be.
Okay.
In a nutshell.
Quite interesting. I want us to return to Liberia. We don't need our passports though. It's a matter of a click of a button and we are into Liberia. It's unfortunate, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, we've not managed to have, that is Miss Fatou Jani, that is the Article 19 West African personality. She's not managed to be a part of us because of a few hitches that fell into the way. But otherwise, we are really grateful that our brother from Liberia, that is Mr. Lami, and for reasons I'm not going to disclose, I'm not making pronunciation of his other name. But Lami, do you feel digital innovations like face recognition, biometrics and the likes violate human rights at one stage? The use of them, does it violate human rights at one stage?
No, not necessarily. So on the face of it doesn't necessarily violate human rights. So what happens is how those technologies are used is what determines whether they violate human rights or not. So like recently we've been hearing about the Pegasus issues, about this spyware that intelligence agencies in different governments have been using to spy on journalists. Obviously, if you do that, then you'll be violating human rights. But if it's basically to protect the safety of the society and to ensure that you document each individual, like for elections purposes, we've always had problems with people double registering or people getting involved in fraud when it comes to elections. So biometric data acquisition helps to lower that level of fraud. So with respect to that, it's a good thing. So the problem is with how the technology is used, not necessarily the acquisition of the technology. So for me, I don't see the mere acquisition of facial technology, facial recognition technology, or any other technology for that matter, as something that is bad. It's the usage that we should be having problems with.
Ask you, Lami, on a light note, which country would you wish to come to if it was getting out of Liberia? Because Uganda has open invites to you.
No, I mean, I like Uganda. I was there for a 2-week period, I think, in 2013. You know, it's a nice country. I like that. You know, I like Uganda.
Wow. Wow. Anyway, we thank you for your time as well as your contribution. And because we are getting into the final 2 or 3 minutes of this particular interaction, we are saying greetings to the people in Liberia, but as well, feel free all the time. And anytime we do get onto you for this kind of interaction, please accept us in wholeheartedness.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Right. Well, the next time round, we shall simply wave at you and say goodbye. But otherwise, the two gentlemen, I thank you so much for this interaction and as well the eye-opening that you have availed. Edwin has done a very wonderful job. You might have realized it was just a short interaction, but given us so much insight about the PPD and what they are doing, and as well to you, Gilbert, for the research that you did. Someone was asking me earlier, were you not facilitated by someone so as to pinch particular people?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Like I said, the objective of this study is to facilitate a conversation that is geared towards improving the transparency and accountability of procurements of these systems, but also ensuring that the rights to privacy are respected and protected. And none of this can be done when there is no oversight. Some form of accountability
has to be there.
In fact, one of the recommendations we make is that these agencies should be making some annual transparency reports disclosing, for example, what third parties they have given this information to and under what conditions and these kinds of things, so that, you know, there's some form of accountability and feedback to the public.
Edwin, you can be sure we shall be knocking at your door anytime soonest for more insight into what's happening at the PPDA. Please feel free and don't take it to be an investigation. It will simply be an interaction. And just as we have had a bit of water, coffee, it will be as well when that kind of time comes, God willing.
Thank you.
Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you can follow the two companies, or rather organizations, that is the PPDA, on their website. Simply type that into your browser, that search engine, and look out for the PPDA, that is the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority. You will have a lot of information coming your way, how to contact them, the services they offer, and so much more. Just as you can as well look out for the Africa Freedom of Information Center on that search engine, on that browser of yours, and you will be good to go. I am available to you on Twitter at Tony Kent Chaze, and for this particular discussion, which has been highlighting the government procurement of digital technologies systems, we have to bring it to a close at this particular juncture. Thank you for watching us. This is UBC TV, inspiring Uganda. Gentlemen, I hope I made you guys
Patriotism is a feeling of love, devotion, and the willingness to sacrifice for one's country.
I say no to corruption because I put my